0947 hours. The Caribbean Sea. The AN/SPY-1DV radar console aboard the USS Jason Dunham does not simply light up, it transforms. The display shifts to a color that has no routine operational meaning, a searing amber that indicates the system has moved past alert status into a category that means one thing. Kinetic action is no longer theoretical. Non-essential lighting across the Combat Information Center cuts automatically. What remains is the cold blue glow of the tactical consoles and the rhythmic pulse of the master threat panel cycling red. 300 sailors on a $2 billion guided missile destroyer have just entered the most compressed decision window in naval warfare. The synthesized voice of the Aegis combat system cuts through the CIC with absolute clarity. Weapon separation, missile launch detected. Target acquisition confirmed. The Su-30 Mk2 flanker had been holding a wide orbit for over an hour, circling, probing, measuring. Its N001VE radar had been painting the Jason Dunham's hull from beyond 100 nautical miles, building a fire control solution with the patience of a pilot who understood that the first shot in this kind of engagement carries everything. The moment he committed, there was no second attempt. What he fired was the KH-31A Krypton, a weapon specifically engineered to make the window between detection and impact too narrow for human cognition to bridge. The KH-31A is not a conventional anti-ship missile. It is a ramjet-powered projectile, a propulsion system that, unlike a rocket, does not carry its own oxidizer. It breathes air, which means it does not burn out after an initial boost phase. It sustains. The ramjet maintains combustion continuously, holding the missile at Mach 2.4 at sea level and accelerating past Mach 3.3 in high-altitude cruise. The solid boosters had already separated, falling away as the ramjet lit off in a blue-white plume. The weapon was now self-sustaining, sea-skimming, and closing at a terminal velocity exceeding 1,000 meters per second. The internal countdown in the CIC read 87 seconds. To put that number in context, the KH-31A travels fast enough to cover a standard marathon distance in 45 seconds. The 87-second window was not a planning timeline. It was the total available time from launch detection to destruction or impact, including target classification, weapon assignment, authorization, launch sequence, intercept trajectory computation, and missile flight time. In that window, every decision had to be made and every action completed. Tactical Action Officer Lieutenant Commander Sarah Phoenix Chen had been tracking the flanker's behavior for the duration of its orbit. Her voice over the tactical net did not carry urgency. It carried finality. Time to react is under 30 seconds. One intercept opportunity. Execute Salvo Alpha Bravo now. The Mark 41 vertical launch system deck covers opened with a sound like compressed air escaping a pressurized chamber at industrial scale. A concussive sigh followed immediately by the hard crack of first-stage ignition. The engagement had begun. What the Venezuelan pilot had not modeled correctly was the nature of the system he was firing against. His strategic calculation was not irrational on its face. The Maduro government, operating under sustained U.S. sanctions, sustained by Russian defense contracts and Chinese economic infrastructure, had been looking for a high-visibility moment that would demonstrate to Moscow, Beijing, and Tehran that American naval deterrence was not as absolute as its reputation suggested. Not necessarily sinking the ship, a strike that visibly damaged a U.S. destroyer in international waters, broadcast globally, would accomplish the same political objective at lower escalation risk. A propaganda victory framed as a demonstration that Russian-supplied hardware could penetrate American defenses. The KH-31A's speed was the logic of the plan. If the missile arrives before the defense can fully cycle, if the window between launch detection and impact is narrow enough to prevent an organized two-salvo intercept response, the probability of a hit climbs sharply. The pilot was not wrong about the physics, he was wrong about the baseline. He planned a race against the Jason Dunham's radar. He was actually racing against the information transfer rate of the entire U.S. naval network. That network had been building its picture of this engagement long before the flanker armed its weapon. A P-8A Poseidon maritime patrol aircraft had been operating in the surveillance role at altitude. Its AN/APY-10 multi-mode radar and AN/ALQ-240 electronic support measures suite, generating a continuous detailed file on the Su-30's electronic signature. radar emission frequencies, targeting cycle behavior, maneuvering patterns. Every time the N001VE radar swept across the Jason Dunham's bearing, the P-8's ESM suite logged the pulse parameters. By the time the pilot selected the KH-31A for employment and opened his weapon bay, the U.S. system already had a complete electronic fingerprint of his aircraft and had been computing preliminary intercept geometries against its probable weapons parameters for an extended period. The Cooperative Engagement Capability Network pushed that data to the Jason Dunham via Link 16 at a transmission rate that makes the term real-time technically inadequate. The data arrived and was integrated into the ship's fire control picture before any human operator on the destroyer's bridge had processed the launch visually. CEC allows a ship to fire based on targeting data provided by a sensor that is not physically on that ship. The Jason Dunham could engage a target that was over the radar horizon beyond what her own AN/SPY-1D could directly see, because the P-8's track data was being fused into her weapon system as if it were her own radar return. The Venezuelan pilot's assumption that he was engaging an isolated warship was not a tactical miscalculation. It was a fundamental misunderstanding of the architecture he was operating against. The Aegis Baseline 9 combat management system had begun computing firing solutions before the KH-31A separated from the aircraft. The computational throughput of the system, capable of simultaneously tracking over 100 targets and computing engagement solutions across multiple threat axes, reduced the time between threat detection and weapon release authorization to approximately 400 milliseconds. That number is shorter than the duration of the average human eye blink. The decision to fire was made before any human in the CIC had consciously registered the launch. 0947:36. Salvo Alpha, the first pair of SM-2 Block YIIC missiles, cleared their Mk-41 cells, executed the characteristic Aegis pitch-over maneuver that orients them onto their computed intercept bearing, and accelerated past Mach 3.5. The SM-2 Block YIIC's 140-pound continuous rod fragmentation warhead is not designed to produce a single detonation. It is designed to produce a dense, geometrically precise cloud of pre-fragmented tungsten traveling at over 5,000 feet per second. Not a blast, but a lethal volume of metal through which no airframe can pass intact. The intercept geometry does not require a direct hit. It requires the warhead to detonate within lethal radius of the target. The Venezuelan pilot, watching the SM-2 launch plumes from 75 kilometers out, held his escape vector. His doctrine held that the KH-31A's combination of speed and sea-skimming altitude would defeat or significantly degrade a single-ship interceptor response. He was still operating on the model of an isolated warship. 0947:37. Salvo Bravo, the second pair of SM-2s, launched. This was the insurance layer. The redundancy that the doctrine of guaranteed kill requires. Not because Salvo Alpha was expected to fail, but because in a live engagement against a Mach 3 threat, the acceptable probability of mission success is not 85%. The AN/SPG 62 fire control illuminators on the Jason Dunham superstructure were already painting the incoming KH-31A track with the X-band radar energy required for the SM-2's terminal semi-active homing phase. 0948:15. The lead SM-2 from Salvo Alpha closed the remaining distance to the KH-31A's track vector. Its radar seeker locked onto the target return at engagement range. The proximity fuse processed the decreasing distance measurement and detonated the warhead at the computed optimal fragmentation point, a few meters ahead of the incoming missile's nose. The tungsten cloud expanded at 5,000 feet per second into the path the KH-31A was traveling at 1,000 meters per second. The ramjet casing, titanium composite, designed to withstand sustained supersonic airflow, was penetrated in multiple locations simultaneously. The remaining ramjet fuel ignited. The KH-31A came apart in a supersonic fireball. The second SM-2, arriving milliseconds behind Salvo Alpha's lead round, flew through the debris field and confirmed destruction with its seeker before its own proximity fuse triggered on the fragment cloud. 0948:21. CIC splash. Track Sierra 7 is destroyed. The silence that followed in the Combat Information Center was the specific kind of silence that follows 48 seconds of compressed decision-making under conditions where the alternative outcome is a 1-ton warhead impacting the hull, not celebration, controlled release. The entire engagement, from weapon separation to confirmed target destruction, had elapsed in less time than it takes most people to decide what to order at a drive-thru. The Venezuelan pilot's radar scope showed the loss of the KH-31A's telemetry track. He understood what that meant without needing to process it further. He turned south and accelerated away from the area at maximum military power. What he left behind was more than a failed attack. An FA/18E Super Hornet that had been holding at altitude during the engagement was immediately vectored to the debris impact coordinates. Its AN/ASQ-228A TFLIR targeting pod, a forward-looking infrared system capable of generating high-resolution thermal imagery at standoff range, began documenting the debris field. The thermal signature of the KH-31A's ramjet failure mode, the specific temperatures, the fragmentation pattern, the fuel combustion profile at the moment of warhead detonation was captured in detail. This data would be processed into updated seeker programming for future U.S. interceptor missiles and would refine the electronic countermeasures profiles used against ramjet-powered weapons in any future engagement. The pilot who flew that flanker had intended to demonstrate a vulnerability in American naval defense. What he had actually done was provide the U.S. Navy with live-fire performance data on the KH-31A under operational conditions, information worth considerably more than the $4.5 million the missile cost to build. Captain Riley transmitted on the open tactical frequency. This is USS Jason Dunham. We have successfully defended ourselves in international waters. We are maintaining course and speed. Any further hostile action will be met with decisive and overwhelming force. The cost accounting is exact. 4 SM-2 Block AIIC missiles, approximately $8 million in interceptor expenditure. Return, 1 KH-31A, destroyed before impact, a $2 billion warship and its crew intact. Complete live-fire performance data on Russia's primary anti-ship ramjet weapon and the electronic warfare response signatures of the Aegis system documented by the Venezuelan side in a context where the system performed at full capability rather than suppressed for operational security reasons. That last point is worth dwelling on. The Venezuelan pilot's plan required the KH-31A to reach the ship. It did not. But it also required the engagement to demonstrate that the Aegis system's response time could be challenged by a Mach 3 threat. That was the intelligence value Moscow was looking for from this operation. Confirmation of a theoretical vulnerability that Russian naval planners have been modeling for years. What the system demonstrated instead was 400 millisecond decision to launch latency. 2-salvo redundant intercept execution within 87 seconds of launch detection. P8 to ship targeting data fusion operating transparently within the engagement timeline, and confirmed first-round effectiveness against a sea-skimming supersonic target under live operational conditions. The engagement answered the question Moscow was asking, but not in the direction the answer was supposed to run. The strategic lesson embedded in 48 seconds of kinetic action over the Caribbean is not about the speed of the KH-31A. Speed is table stakes at this level of engagement. The lesson is about the relationship between information transfer rate and decision latency on each side. The Venezuelan pilot's decision cycle, from target lock to launch to observing the result, ran at the speed of a human being operating combat aircraft. The U.S. system's decision cycle ran at the speed of networked computational processing. The pilot was not competing against a ship. He was competing against a data architecture that had already pre-computed his firing solution before he made the decision to use it. That asymmetry between a human speed decision process and a machine speed one operating with information from sensors the attacking pilot didn't know were tracking him is what determines outcomes in this class of engagement before the first weapon is ever selected. The KH-31A was fast enough. It was not fast enough to race the network it was fired into. The Caribbean was not a demonstration that Russian-supplied hardware fails against American ships. It was a demonstration of what happens when a tactically competent adversary operating capable equipment fires into a system whose decision speed and sensor architecture they have not correctly modeled. The gap between what the Venezuelan pilot believed he was engaging and what he was actually engaging was the engagement outcome, written before launch. Every government currently developing anti-access and area denial strategies premised on high-speed missile saturation of U.S. naval formations now has an additional data point to factor into those plans. The USS Jason Dunham held her course. The flanker's electronic signature shrank off the southern edge of the scope. The watch rotation continued on schedule. If this breakdown gave you a clear picture of how modern naval missile defense actually operates, subscribe and share it. More of these analyses keep coming as long as you are here for them.